Welcome to Sacred Realms. It's a great day in Hyrule, y'all. Welcome to Sacred Realms, a Zelda Retrospective Podcast. I'm your host, Lyndon Willoughby, joined as always by my co-host, Matt Willoughby. We have crossed over into the transitional point of the game. We're no longer in, I keep calling it the front half. It's not divided evenly into halves, but the other shoe has dropped on the game that we're playing this week, Matt.
Yes, it has. Was there a question there, or just that?
No, it's just exciting.
Yeah, no, it is exciting.
This is a fun time in any season of pod.
It is. It's a very fun time. You know, it always means that the plot recap is juicy and beefy, and the chunk of game was similarly juicy and beefy.
It was,
and
yes.
Much to play.
Yes, there was. A lot to dig into. It's going to be a fun episode. How are you doing, Matt?
I am doing good. It was a crazy busy Monday, but glad to be here to decompress from the stresses of modern life with a little bit of pod, a lot of Zelda, and conversations about all the same. And
we did have an excellent weekend.
We did have a very
weekend.
I wouldn't say relaxing. It was exhausting, but fun.
Was it exhausting? Oh, I guess you. I guess you went a little harder than some of us did.
I did. I went pretty hard.
How you feeling, Matt?
I feel fine now. Look, I recovered the next day, but tired. Tired is a good way of putting that.
Cool. Yeah, it was a Formula One opening weekend, so my brothers and a few friends and I all every year we usually get together out at my folks' place and have some drinks and watch the opening race, and it was a grand old time. So yeah, it was so much fun. Always exciting for the Formula One season to start back up. Almost as exciting for me as football season, but at least they don't overlap all that much. They don't. They really don't. But
this is not a football podcast or a Zelda or a Formula One
podcast. It's also tonight not a podcast with just two co-hosts.
That is true.
It is a podcast that tonight has three co-hosts. Would you like to introduce our co-host this time around? I feel like you never really get to do that.
I don't, because you like to hog the spotlight.
I relinquish it to you.
Huzzah.
And I ask nothing in return.
Not yet, anyway. I'm sure that you'll have something to ask later. Well, tonight we are joined once again by fan favorite and wonderful Discord patron and frequent contributor, friend of the show, webmaster of Zelda Universe, Josh, is here to share his thoughts, feelings, and all the things relating to A Link Between Worlds. Josh, how are you doing tonight?
I'm a fan favorite.
You one of the fan favorites.
Sure
one of the fan favorites.
I'm pretty. I'm checking my notes here. Yeah, I have fan favorite written down. It must be true.
All right. I guess I'm better than I thought I was tonight.
Well, we're fans.
I am back. Thanks for having me.
We're fans of yours, Josh, and you're also one of our favorites. So that in and of itself makes you a fan favorite.
Did Cody tell you to say that?
I feel like Cody would be the one who would be the most likely
not to say that.
To tell us not to say that.
Yeah, Cody would be like, "Tell Josh he sucks at everything." That sounds like something Cody would say.
I don't know, that sounds a little.
He kind of did in the last episode.
That sounds a little mean-spirited for Cody.
I mean, he would say it in that Barack Obama of Australia kind of way. That is lighthearted.
I like to think of him as the cuddly koala bear of the podcast.
I thought that was my job, Lyndon. I'm the cuddly koala bear.
You can't be. You're not from Australia.
I'm also not that cuddly.
You're none of those things.
You're
completely disqualified.
Yeah, fair enough. Fine.
Josh, how you doing tonight, man?
I am doing great.
Glad to hear it. I'm very excited to have you back around for this one, because I know some of the conversations that we've had on Discord have led me to understand that you esteem A Link Between Worlds very highly overall within the canon of Zelda games. And that's definitely the way that Matt and I are trending with it as well. We're both kind of in a very rosy, positive place with it at the moment.
Well, I think you're going to ask me about that anyway, but your assessment is technically correct. but also a little bit old.
Okay, all right. So I mean, look, this is we've done this with we did it with Cody and we did it with Jackson. So I guess it's your turn now. First appearance of the season. Why don't you go ahead and let us know your history with this game and kind of where your thoughts and feelings are at generally about it, or at least were going into this replay.
So my actual experience with the game is it's not unique, but it's probably unique among folks you're going to have on the show because I reviewed this game and had it early. I had it at least a week in advance, maybe more. But that was 10 years ago, so I don't remember anymore.
Did you feel that was like plenty of time for you to comfortably get the full experience, like you weren't rushing?
Yes. I had some life events happen at that same exact time that required a cross country trip where I drove to the East Coast. So that made it a little more challenging. But aside from that, like I had plenty of time. I kind of get to claim to be one of the first folks in the world who 100%ed the game. I had it 100%ed shortly before midnight launch day. And had a whole bunch of notes for all the pieces of heart and all the Mai's and all that stuff to write up quickly. So I had a really cool first experience with the game and definitely loved it. You all know I replay stuff all the time, so I have probably played through this game 5 or 6 times now.
Now, when you say you 100% of the game, just to clarify, obviously, Mai's, pieces of heart, upgraded items, the whole shebang, bottles, whatnot. Are you including the Street Pass challenges in that?
Okay, so no, I didn't do that. There was no way to do that.
Oh, because no one else had it, right?
Yeah. I mean, so you couldn't Street Pass anything. So no, I did not do that. But there's some extra side content stuff we haven't got to yet in the game that I did. Lyndon probably knows what I'm talking about. But no, I had done all the side questy stuff, just finished all of it, and had a pretty thorough understanding of the game by launch. But no, I've replayed it since then, obviously lots of times. I do very much like it. Cody made fun of my Zelda rankings when he was on. Mostly because of Zelda 2, but I think he also knows that technically this game falls in the bottom half of my list. But that's just because there's too many good Zelda games.
Well, that is the truth.
Like I don't have like bad things to say about this game, really. I just have a lot of nostalgia for older games. Tends to be the way it is with me.
It's definitely very crowded up in the top half, so I don't think anyone could fault you for saying that.
Right. And so, yeah, like the anomaly for me is that Zelda 2 is so high. but no, I don't have bad things to say about this game. I think it's great. I replayed it actually not very long ago. I played it in the second half of last year. So playing it again now, it's pretty fresh for me still.
Yeah. And I think it had also been, this is my first time playing it in probably 4 years, I want to say. I think this is probably the third time that I've played all the way through it. And I'm finding so far, and I don't know where you're at with it necessarily, but I'm finding so far that my memories of the game and my attitudes about it and like the way that I remember feeling about it and the amount to which I like it is all remaining pretty consistent. I'm not like it's neither raising or lowering at the moment for me.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Like there's not a whole lot about this game to make me dislike it more, but there's also not a whole lot about it that makes me like it more every time I replay it. It is when we're at about, there's almost 20 Zelda games once Tears of the Kingdom comes out. This is like right around the middle for me. It's like, this is sort of a baseline. A Zelda game needs to be like this kind of Zelda game. Yeah,
absolutely. And there's something to be said for that kind of consistency, right? Like that dependability of formula.
So what top downs specifically rank above this one in your estimation?
A Link to the Past is my all-time favorite video game, period. Link's Awakening, the Minish Cap, Zelda 2, and then also actually Zelda 1. I think that would be all of the top downs.
I mean, that is a pretty stacked like front third of the Zelda lifespan.
Yeah. So the only ones below this are the Oracles and the DS games. Yes.
And the multiplayer games.
Okay. Cool.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So I guess knowing now that A Link to the Past is your favorite game of all time, did this game have a lot of extra special nostalgia for you when you hopped into it, just because it was revisiting that game that you love so much?
Yeah, definitely on the first playthrough, you get that feeling a lot. Since I had at that point, like A Link to the Past was not just my first Zelda game; it was one of my very first video games. Like I owned maybe 3 video games before it, some Mario games and Donkey Kong. And so I had 20 years or whatever of experience playing A Link to the Past. So yeah, it's really great to see a lot of the same environments remade. But there is Max would probably know like the better terms for these things. When we talk about A Link to the Past, they were still trying to figure out dungeons. So there's a lot of like experimental stuff where you would fall in the forest, and a lot of the forest dungeon is kind of pointless.
Right.
You have like the block in the ice palace. Right. There's a bunch of like really memorable, weird things. And A Link Between Worlds is more, I would say it's more similar to Link's Awakening, in that the dungeons are designed to be handheld. Like I did the Dark Palace we're going to talk about in like 30 minutes last night or less, right? Like I knew I could just pick it up, play through a dungeon, and put it down without very much time needed. And the dungeons are a lot more like designed and very themed around an item in a way that A Link to the Past had not solidified the same way.
Yeah.
And so A Link to the Past feels a little more like you're just on an adventure, you're exploring a bunch of stuff. And A Link Between Worlds feels a little more like, especially like when we talk about Lorule, is very segmented, right? You go to the segment you need to do the dungeon that you need a specific item to solve all the puzzles on. It feels more video gamey.
Yeah, I will say that to me. So I think the comparison to Link's Awakening is very apt. I will say that now that I'm kind of examining these things from a critical standpoint, I'm finding A Link Between Worlds' dungeons to generally feel a little bit more focused than Link's Awakening's. Whereas Link's Awakening's can kind of be a little more sprawling and whatnot.
Right, and then like you've noted, there's a lot of keys.
Right. Yeah, it's just key fest.
But yeah, like the games in the 90s, even like Ocarina of Time, we talk about there being a Zelda formula, and that you always have, there's all the puzzles are solved with the dungeon item, right? But it's I think that really once you got, I always look at like the Minish Cap and Twilight Princess as the era where that changed. The dungeons get really, really focused on items. The item that you take in with you, or the item you get in the dungeon. I think they really did shift and like really hone in on that.
Yeah.
That idea.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I really do. And that's something we're going to talk a little bit about in this dungeon, and then more specifically in some others as we get further into the game. But thanks for catching us up on where you're at with A Link Between Worlds. I do want to take just a few minutes before we get into the housekeeping and just ask, I mean, as the webmaster of Zelda Universe, how goes your Tears of the Kingdom prep?
Tears of the Kingdom prep is a little bit difficult because they're being so secretive about the game. A lot of what we're doing is actually just like overhauling, redesigning some of the page layouts to be a little more prepared, have better ways to present all of that content once we have it. Zelda Universe is over 20 years old, and sometimes the design of the actual pages on the website is kind of slow to move forward. So we've been putting a lot of emphasis on fixing it up so that when we have something to talk about, it'll be a lot easier to show everyone.
It's a case of progress by inches, huh?
Yeah, and it's helpful that we have the Minish Cap on Switch and Link's Awakening on Switch. That's actually what most folks right now are going to see you to look at the Minish Cap.
So really interesting.
We're getting a lot of folks playing.
I'm sure we'll reference ZU as well, but really interesting thing. Matt and I, like I say, we were at our parents' house this weekend and we were helping clean out one of the closets. And lo and behold, sitting on a top shelf, layer of dust, probably hasn't been touched in 15 years, underneath the Megaton strategy guide for Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver was a basically mint condition Prima strategy guide for Minish Cap.
It was like a treasure chest find. We were like, oh my gosh, look at that. Yeah, that is really crazy. Cool. On top of it was a Heart Gold and Soul Silver
I
Prima
just
guide.
Said that.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Yeah. Why don't you listen to me?
Yeah, I generally try to tune you out as much as possible.
But no, I thought I had a guide for the Minish Cap and I went hunting for it a while back and I don't have one. I have one for pretty much every other game that they made one for, but I apparently never got that one.
Well, so I guess, are you going back to Tears of the Kingdom for a second? How'd you feel about the Direct? Did it scratch a pretty good itch for you? Did you feel more excited, less excited by what you were seeing?
About Zelda, yeah, it was great. I know some folks don't want to hear all the stuff in the trailer, so I won't be real specific. But there was stuff in the trailer I didn't expect, and that kind of just made me say, "Huh." But I'm okay with it. I mean, I have lived through Zelda with trains and all sorts of stuff before. Yeah. Like I'm open to them trying out whatever new ideas they want to try out.
Are you saying that Zelda or Link on a tractor was not exactly what you were looking for out of the out of the trailer?
Yeah. Yeah, that was unexpected moments. But no, I think it looks great. I'm a little. I tend to be a little more contained in my hype and try to keep my expectations in check. But it's totally cool that there's a whole section of the fan base that just wants to blow the roof off it and get really, really excited.
Well, I'm not going to put a damper on anyone's excitement. Usually, that enthusiasm is rewarded where this series is concerned. So it's a pretty safe bet in my experience.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, cool. Obviously, we'll have a lot more to talk about with Tears of the Kingdom as we get closer to that release date. We're just a shade over 2 months out at this point, so it's coming real soon, y'all. It's gonna be real fun. But of course, we're not here to talk about Tears of the Kingdom. We are here to talk about A Link Between Worlds. And with that being said, damn it, man, I'm really trying not to say that. Why is that so tough? Like,
it's your comfort phrase.
It
Lyndon.
is, but I feel like I worked so hard at the front of the podcast to
not do the what's and the and the likes and the filler words. And this one's just, which I feel like we have pretty good lack of filler words like that. I feel like we're pretty controlled about that
for the most part.
Yeah,
I think. I don't know.
Anyway. Maybe let's try to find you a new catchphrase. We'll workshop that.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. But until that happens,
don't steal Tingle's.
Don't what?
Don't steal Tingle's catchphrase. He'll come get you.
Tingle Kululimpa.
Kululimpa. Yeah,
These are Tingle's magic words. Don't steal them.
Yeah. Well, I think there's 0% chance of that on this podcast.
All right. Well. Tingle, Kululimpa. Let's get into the housekeeping.
Oh, God.
I don't think that's going to stick around.
That's definitely not sticking around. That's bad.
Put that one in the bad pile.
It's like when Saru was workshopping his captain's catchphrase because he didn't want to use engage. Yeah, there was a lot of them, and a lot of them were really bad.
Yeah, not anyone can use engage. That's a Picard thing. You can't steal Picard's catchphrase.
There were other people, like I think Cisco used engage.
I don't.
Again, not a Star Trek podcast, so maybe we'll just put put that sidebar off to the side.
If you didn't know, Sacred Realms is a weekly re-examination of The Legend of Zelda, one little slice at a time. Sacred Realms drops every Wednesday and is available on all major podcast networks. Every week we play a new section of a Zelda game, then we sit down here to talk and to drop our hot takes. If that sounds fun, please head over to Apple Podcasts, hit that subscribe button, and be sure to leave us a review. 5-star reviews are greatly appreciated, and they have a chance to get a shout out here on the show. If you want more Sacred Realms in your life, you can head over to patreon.com/Sacred Realms Pod to get access to our Discord channel, listener mail, vote on what game we play next, and much more. Additionally, one of the benefits that Master Sword patrons and above get is we read their names every week here on the show. Those legendary individuals are Shepherd Street, Matthew, Chris, Daniel, Fallout 907, Kelso, Tiffany the Star, Daxel, Patrice, Stephanie, Darknuck, Brian, George, Mike, Dylan, Allie, Lennon, Melanie, Kolku, Aiden, Rowan, Josh, Nick, Dante, Gep, Brittany, Davey, Haru, The Mighty, Derek, Albert, Mark, Andy, Cameron, Ben, Daniel, Nick D_TV, Travis, Christian, Jonathan, Hyrule Interviews, a.k.a. Max Nichols, Garrett, and Drew. These are the most legendary of individuals. I would accompany them into a dark alternate universe any day of the week.
Would you? I don't know that I would accompany very many people, if any, into a dark alternate universe.
It was meant to be a statement of camaraderie.
Okay, well, I think we can have lots of camaraderie without voluntarily following people into dark universes.
There you go. Matt's love for you all is conditional. Okay, so
that's true of almost everybody. So don't take it personally.
All right. I actually think we do have a new 5-star review queued up. So Matt thinks he's going to let that one off the chain.
We do. Jahameric wrote us a nice 5-star review. Says, I got into a big Zelda mood recently and decided I wanted to play through the whole series, having only beaten 3 games myself. Man, Jahameric, that is a commitment when you're 3 out of 19-ish. All right. And as usual, when I get into a mood for something, I seek out podcasts on it. I found a handful that were enjoyable, but ultimately, this is the only Zelda podcast I stuck with. Oh, thank you, Jahameric. The hosts are fun, and I say that as someone whose favorite is Twilight Princess, which we notoriously don't love. And I love the systematic way each game is tackled, going dungeon by dungeon. It's made for great conversation and easy listening. Thank you, Jahameric. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. If that is, any significant name to you, thank you for the 5-star review. We appreciate it.
Great review, Jahameric. If you, like this wonderful person, have recently found yourself in a big Zelda mood, or you know somebody who you think might be susceptible to a big Zelda mood at some point in the future, please refer them to our podcast and let them know that 5-star reviews are greatly appreciated and we love reading them on the show.
And it's a good free way to support that show.
Very free. No rupees required. But without further ado, let's talk about what we played. That happens every week, of course, in the Sacred Realms Rundown, which is a 6-part analysis of what we played this week and the feelings that it made us feel. Today, we are covering A Link Between Worlds Chapter 4. Part 1 is the plot recap, as always, as usually, read by Matt. Take it away, Matt.
9 pages of plot recap coming up. As Sahasrala's words fade from our ears, we set our sights to the northwest, where lies the Lost Woods and the legendary blade. Eager to reach the princess before any ill fate can befall her, we use the bell to summon Irene to fly us there as quickly as possible. Irene's broom appears, but Irene is nowhere in sight. Concerned for our new friend, and with a sense of dread and urgency, we grab onto the broom and fly over to the Lost Woods with haste. Once we reach the Lost Woods, we enter to find a circle of 9 Poes. These mischievous ghosts guard the paths within the Lost Woods to prevent anyone from finding the Master Sword. However, they will allow us to pass if we can solve their puzzle. At first, we must only keep track of one of the ghosts as they dance around to try to confuse us. They disperse in different directions, and we must follow the correct ghost in order to explore further into the woods. However, once we reach the next area, the ghosts become even more tricky. Now they dance around to confuse us, but instead of following only one, we must follow 2 of them and avoid the paths that they take. The final challenge is the trickiest of all, and now we must keep track of 3 of the unfriendly ghosts and avoid the paths that each of them takes in order to find our way forward. Paradoxically, the only way forward is to return from the path that we just came from. Confused but determined, we follow the path indicated and find ourselves in a peaceful glade full of wildlife, pure light, soft grass, and a sense of peace that we haven't felt since before we embarked upon this journey. In the middle of this peaceful and wonderful glade, we see a stone pedestal, and in the middle of this pedestal rests a magnificent blade, resplendent in a beam of light. This blade can be none other than the legendary Master Sword. We approach the Master Sword with reverence, as this blade is one of the most legendary and powerful artifacts in the entirety of Hyrule. As we grasp the hilt of the legendary sword, the three pendants of virtue glow with an unearthly power. Imbued with their magic, we lift the Master Sword high into the air and feel its holy power suffuse us with an otherworldly might. With the Master Sword in hand, we have everything we need to break the barrier of dark magic that holds the castle and the princess in its sway. Sahasrahla speaks to us again, telling us to make haste to the castle as time is running short. So we head to the castle as quickly as we can to find that Sahasrahla is already waiting for us at the gate. Aha! No doubt that is the very blade of evil's bane. Well done, Link. Now there's not time to waste. Strike down this nefarious barrier. With the sacred blade in hand, we head right up to the dark barrier of magic and plunge its blade into the flow of darkness. There's a blinding flash and a surge of power, and then the barrier is gone. We hurry into the courtyard of the castle to begin our hunt for the princess, hoping against hope that Yuga has not yet reached her. The castle is full of enemies at every turn, and as we go further in, the enemy knights become more and more numerous and more powerful. We explore every room of the lower wing of the castle, and even enter the audience chamber where we first met Zelda, but she is nowhere to be found. We head to the upper level and into the top part of the castle, making our way through royally decorated rooms, carpeted and draped with the finest rugs and tapestries we have ever seen. After fighting through a small army, we find Zelda near the top of the castle, but to our horror, she has already been found by our enemy. Yuga stands in front of the princess, and we hear Zelda tell him, "Your rampage through my kingdom must stop. How many more of my people do you intend to take?" "My little acquisition tour of Hyrule is nearly at an end, princess. It really was quite a spree. A sage here, a sage there, and now your Impa too? I've already got all 7 sages." "What do you plan to do with them?" Zelda asks, horrified at the implication of what this evil sorcerer could do with such power. "Never you mind, for I have one more painting to make, so please rid your mind of all concerns. I don't want your portrait to feature any unsightly worry lines. I wish to preserve you at your very best. I dare say you're even a match for her grace. Confess it, you monster, you plan to use our 7 sages to revive Ganon, don't you? Oh, what golden hair you have. Such bright locks are normally far too sunny for my tastes, but for you, I'll make an exception." Zelda protests Yuga's indifference to her pleas, but Yuga has had enough conversation from the princess. "I find your protests inelegant, not to mention irrelevant. I wish only to possess your beauty, Princess Zelda of Hyrule, not all these ugly words of yours. Oh, you are going to make a spectacular painting, my dear." And before our eyes, Yuga casts the same spell that we saw him use on Osfala. In an extended flash of bright light, accompanied by the horrified screams of the princess, we see Yuga's magic do its work. Zelda, now trapped in a magical portrait, collapses to the ground as Yuga stands over it and declares the painting his masterpiece. Once Yuga is done admiring his work, he turns to see us at the foot of the stairs. He is more than shocked to see us out and about instead of splashed on some wall somewhere. But instead of learning the secret of how this happened, he summons a handful of evil knights to stop us and flees through the nearby door. We can't let him escape with Zelda like that, so we make quick work of the knights and follow hot on his heels. We make our way up several more floors of the castle, fighting our way through more dark knights in the process. Eventually, we make our way to the very top floor, where we find Yuga talking to himself about how impressive his own skill is, as he admires the portrait of Zelda. He's furious at our continued interference and refuses to let us delay his departure any longer. He suddenly spawns 2 copies of himself that go to the corners of the room and merge into the walls in flashes of lightning. He also merges into the wall, and the 3 copies of Yuga begin flying around the walls of the room. We ready the Master Sword and our bow and join the battle, hoping to defeat him and save the princess before any more harm is done. We follow the real Yuga's painting around the room and stun him when he comes out of the wall with our bow and arrow. From there, we start hacking away at him with the Master Sword. And after a few rounds of Waka-Yuga, he throws a real tantrum and starts moving even faster around the walls. Every time he and his copies re-merge into the walls, they blast lightning. But luckily, following Yuga around isn't too hard, and we are able to stun him fairly reliably. Anytime we accidentally hit a copy, though, we spawn a pesky Dark Knight that we must deal with first. But, in short order, we have him beaten into submission. Even though we have severely beaten the sorcerer, he claims to be bored of our fight. He grabs Zelda's portrait and flees through a new hole in the back wall, saying that once he releases Ganon, lowly creatures like us won't be worth his time. We follow as fast as we can, and the only route left to us leads right into Zelda's study. But Yuga is nowhere to be found. We search the room high and low until the flutter of a banner with the Triforce on it catches our eye. We head over and slash it down, revealing a strange black chasm with glittering edges going straight into the wall. We decide to investigate and merge into the wall using the power of Ravio's bracelet and head inside. The chasm turns into some kind of tunnel that is full of swirling colors and bright lights. It is utterly disorienting, and we are being more pulled forward than actually moving of our own free will. After an indeterminate amount of time, we emerge into a dark room that looks like Zelda's study, but with some marked differences. Whereas Zelda's study was immaculately clean, sunny, cheery, and smelled like sweet flowers, this room is dark and disheveled. The sky through the window is dark and full of thunder, and the plates that were on the wall have been cast down and shattered along with the mirror. The smell is spicier and muskier, something unfamiliar but not entirely unpleasant. Taking all of this in quickly, we leave the room and make our way back to the castle to pursue Yuga. As we enter the castle that is not Hyrule Castle, we see Yuga standing in a large chamber surrounded by paintings and suffused with dark magic. Upon the paintings, we see Osfala, Irene, Impa, Zelda, and the Zora Queen, Ceres, and to our shock and horror, Little Gully. As we take in this awful scene with Yuga boasting the whole time about his collection, he reveals the full intention of his plan: to summon Ganon and to merge with him. He begins the ritual to summon the Demon King, and above him the paintings start rotating swiftly. In the middle of this circle over Yuga's head, a dark orb comes into existence between the paintings and begins to expand. Eventually, a portal opens, and from it emerges the ancient foe of the people of Hyrule. The Demon King himself emerges, strangely silent and seemingly inert, but still terrifying in his size and power. As the ritual completes, Yuga summons the Triforce of Power from Ganon and commands for the two of them to be merged together with the Triforce of Power to become, in his own words, truly superior. As we watch helplessly, the Demon King seems to fade out of existence and into the body of the sorcerer. A red torrent of energy blasts forth from the summoning ring, throwing the paintings all over the room, and a dark sphere of magic covers up the writhing transformation of the abomination before us. Finally, the transformation is complete, and before us stands the unholy merger of Yuga and Ganon. A pale beast, larger even than Ganon alone. Yuga's red mane of hair still flows from the head of this monster, but in all other aspects, it is the very image of the Demon King in all his terror. It roars in triumph and rage, sending a shockwave of magic across the room that flings us to the ground. It advances on us with a huge golden spear in hand. Its every footfall causes the room to shake, and even though we don't plan to go down without a fight, we know that we are absolutely no match for this amalgamation of evil. Just before the Demon King can strike us down, however, a dark blue portal opens in the floor and a woman appears through it. She holds a scepter with an upside-down pyramid, and from it she blasts the Demon King with magic that shakes the room. The Demon King's own magical shield cannot withstand this newcomer's spell, and he becomes encased in what looks like dark blue spider webs and becomes completely immobilized. From our spot on the floor, we can see that this new person is dressed in royal robes and looks more than a bit like Zelda from behind, except for the striking purple hair. She turns to face us, and if it weren't for the purple hair and red eyes, we would swear to the goddesses that it was Zelda who was standing before us. We also recognize that the staff she wields doesn't have an upside-down pyramid, but a triad of upside-down triforces. O hero of Hyrule, I can only hold the beast at bay for so long. It should prove enough time to bid you a most sorrowful welcome to my kingdom. Welcome to Lorule. My name is Princess Hilda, and I have failed you in every way. I knew Yuga planned to slip into your world to abduct Zelda and the sages, but I couldn't stop him. Now he has used them to summon the Demon King and siphon his powers. Yuga's appetites will soon consume our worlds, Hyrule and Lorule, the beasts for the taking. As she finishes this dire proclamation, the Demon King shakes his bonds and seems as though he's beginning to loosen their hold. Hilda, sensing this as well, uses her magic to send us out of the castle and to safety. While we teleport to safety, Hilda continues to speak to us, while Yuga Ganon is contained. She says that she will do everything in her power to keep Yuga at bay while we try to find a way to defeat him. She says that in order to do so, we must awaken our full power as the hero of Hyrule. She senses that the paintings of the seven sages that Yuga has scattered across Lorule hold part of the key to unlocking the needed power to defeat this dark beast. She bids us farewell with the promise that we will meet again, and we finally fall unconscious. We awaken to the familiar sound of hammer against steel, and a voice that sounds familiar to our ears. As we slowly regain the feeling in our legs and the pounding of our head recedes slightly, we hear the voice of our master's wife. But instead of her usual sweet tones and caring demeanor, she is saying some really horrible things and being extremely rude. Apparently, she found us unconscious on the road and drug us here to the shop. But she's being very begrudging about saving our life, and we decide that as soon as we can stand, we better be off. We head outside, still somewhat dazed, but not so dazed as to forget the traumatic events that we last witnessed. As if hearing these thoughts, Hilda contacts us magically to warn us about the kingdom we find ourselves in now. While it may look somewhat like Hyrule, it is very much not. Lorule and Hyrule used to be worlds apart, but Yuga's magic has forced them close enough together that travel between them is now possible. She also tells us that the seven sages we seek are spread across Lorule, locked in dungeons. In order to reach some of them, we will have to travel to their counterparts area of Hyrule and cross back over to Lorule from there. Lastly, she warns us that the people of her kingdom are not very welcoming to strangers, so we should be on our guard as we explore. We head off to find a way back to Hyrule and immediately discover that Hilda was not exaggerating in the slightest. The monsters roam in greater numbers and are far more powerful than anything we have fought in our world. There are giant Hinoxes that throw bombs, there are creatures with the heads of beasts that throw spears or stab with pitchfork that we learn are called moblins, and there are terrifying monsters that are just walking, chomping mouths. All of this simply spurs us to find a way out of here as quickly as possible, so we head to where Kakariko Village would be in our own world, hoping at least for people instead of these monsters. We reach the town and find it almost completely destroyed and deserted. Only a few buildings stand, and in the wreckage of many of the former buildings, there are people in masks who glare suspiciously at us. We decide to avoid any contact and simply look around for anything like the portal in Zelda's study. We finally find one in a destroyed house and head directly through it. We pop out, back in the familiar village of Kakariko, but instead of being outside, we ended up inside the home of one of the more stylish members of the village. She exclaims at our presence, but in return for a compliment paid to her new dress, gives us a piece of heart and sends us on our way. We head straight home to get our thoughts in order and find our bearings, and we find that Sahasrahla is there waiting for us. Next to the old elder is another fissure like the one we used to travel to Lorule. According to Sahasrahla, these fissures have popped up all over Hyrule after another earthquake shook the foundations of the world. We also decide to pay a visit to our renter, Ravio, while we are here and stock up on any items that might be useful. We find out that he is willing to sell these items he rented to us, so we take the time to empty our wallet and permanently purchase a few tools for the journey. With these things out of the way, we decide to start our journey in Lorule in the same place we started out in the beginning, so we head to the Eastern Palace region to find a nice fissure to pass through. We quickly locate one in the hilly area behind some fallen rocks that we blow up with our bombs. And once we re-enter Lorule, Hilda gives us the lowdown on the area we find ourselves in. She tells us that we have entered an extremely evil place within Lorule, and that here a contingent of soldiers that once served the royal family have created a cult that worships a formidable monster that dwells in the palace beyond. They are obsessed with capturing anyone that ventures into their area, so we must sneak past them without being detected in order to enter the Dark Palace. The guards all wear masks depicting some vaguely dinosaur-esque monster and patrol the maze ceaselessly. But with our ability to merge into walls, we make fairly quick work of maneuvering around them. As we approach the Dark Palace, it really lives up to its name. Not a single spot of illumination is to be seen anywhere in the vicinity other than two green flames that dimly light the blocked entrance. But there is no sun, no stars, and no moonlight. The palace is decorated with statues of monsters, and the stone is an eerie shade of green, like the flames that light the entrance. We blow open the entrance and head inside to find a room of utter darkness. With our handy lantern, we light the way enough to begin to explore the dungeon. This place is utterly dark, and many of the obstacles that block our way can only be seen in that darkness. Oddly luminescent stones that only glow in the absence of light show paths over abysses. Arrows flow along the walls showing paths to other rooms, and platforms materialize out of thin air when light leaves the area. Not only are there a variety of puzzles to navigate, but in this darkness are many enemies that thrive in the gloom. Ghosts who are only vulnerable when lit by a torch or lantern plague many of the rooms. Fire-spitting monsters called Kadongos patrol the area, and Gorias guard some of the rooms that allow passage to other floors. And helmeted little beasts called Helmosaurs try to ram us with their heads from the darkness. All in all, this place is extremely dangerous, and each floor has more puzzles than the last. As we progress through, using bombs and the fire rod and lanterns to solve the puzzles, we see that light is streaming in from above. We head to the top floor where we find windows that are letting in light, but some have been boarded over. We know from the first room that opening up some doors requires us to shine light on beacons in the floor that look like eyes, so we go ahead and break open all the boards to let the light into this dark place. We continue down the dungeon, freeing the path of the light as anywhere we can, until we reach the basement. There, a giant gemstone-encrusted gate guards the boss door. But as we have filtered the light down to this lowest level and activated each of the switches, the gate opens before us. Using the big key, we head inside to confront the monster and free the sage that it guards. We find only a dark room and decide to use the lantern to light a few torches in two of the corners in the room. Once we do, the room is completely lined with fire, and it illuminates the gigantic skull of one of the beasts that we saw carved on the outside of the temple. We look expectantly at this skull, but to our shock, a huge monster drops from the ceiling instead. This gigantic reptilian beast is completely studded with gemstones, and its head is adorned with a skull exactly like the one on the wall. Its tail is long and spiked with diamond, and it roars in fury at our intrusion into its domain. The Gemosaur King dives right into battle, trying to gobble us up and end it quickly. We start flying around the room, trying to avoid this huge monster as best we can. Our arrows and sword do absolutely nothing to the reptile, as the gems along its body protect it from such weapons. We decide to instead start laying bombs in hopes that the explosives will shatter the crystals. Luck is indeed with us, as not only do the crystals shatter, but they spread rupees all over the room. We use this tactic again and again to blow off the crystals, and eventually even the skull that protects the creature's head. Underneath the gem-encrusted skull is a pulsing red orb that has to be some kind of weak spot. The beast roars as its newly exposed weakness and begins attacking even faster. It not only bites and lunges, but uses its tail to throw shards of diamond at us whenever we stand still for too long. Using the bow, we shoot its head a few times, which really enrages the creature. It lets out a shriek that extinguishes all the fires in the room. It is now in complete darkness, and we can see its glowing yellow eyes. It starts stampeding around the room at breakneck speed. We have to quickly light the lantern so that we can see our foe and hopefully stun it for a moment as well. We merge into the wall and make our way to both torches to relight the ring of fire around the arena. Once the light is back, the creature is indeed momentarily stunned, and we take the opportunity to finish it off with another few shots from our bow. It falls and explodes in glorious fashion. In its wake, a beam of light appears that we know will teleport us out of here. But we don't see any sign of the painting that we are looking for. We step into the beam of light, and instead of being transported out of the dungeon, we find ourselves in a strange place of surreal waterfalls and directionless light. We stand on a raised dais surrounded by 7 other raised daises. The platform in front of us begins to glow, and a strange crystal appears upon it. From this strange crystal emerges none other than our plucky friend Gully. He seems scared and confused at first, but quickly drops the pretense and announces that he knows he is one of the 7 sages, as he says. Even though he's a little unsure about the pronunciation of that, he seems to be excited and eager about his role. We talk briefly, mostly about how he is worried that without him around, no one will wake us up for work in the morning, and his concern for his parents. But hopefully once all this is over, we can both go back home to the way that things were. Behind us, the portal appears again, and before we step into it, Gully encourages us to hurry up and find the rest of the sages so that we can put an end to this adventure. With the succinct summary of our next steps and the admonition of our little friend, we step into the portal back to Lorule to continue this path to defeat the Demon King.
Well done, as always, Matt. That brings us to part 2, which is our takes, where we talk about this section of the game and how it made us feel. So, Matt, I usually send it to the guest first, but
you do, yes.
But I'm going to send it to you first tonight, Matt. Because,
I'm honored.
Like we said at the top of the show, this is the point in the game where the other shoe drops. We get our introduction to the other world, like the dark world equivalent. That this game presents to us, and the game gets a whole lot bigger all at once. It basically doubles in size.
Indeed.
So let me know. I mean, what was this week like for you? What was this chunk of game like for you?
So, this was a lot of game. It was mostly a lot of game because I kept getting sidetracked by other things. I would go set forth to go to Hyrule Castle. One thing I did do, I went immediately and got the Master Sword. I didn't get sidetracked to do that. Got the Master Sword. Then I went to go to Hyrule Castle. And along the way, I got like 3 Mai-Mais. And so I went back to Mother Mai-Mai. And then I went to visit Ravio for no specific reason. Actually, no, it was I wanted to get the Fire Rod and the Ice Rod because I had enough rupees to, splurge. So I went and discovered I could outright buy items. So I bought some items and also rented both of the rods. And then I went and got more Mai-Mais and then upgraded items and then went to Hyrule Castle. And then from Hyrule Castle, you go to Lorule. And then in Lorule, I found a lot more Mai-Mais and more rupees and more other things to do. And I started going in and out of the portals and found pieces of heart from the fancy lady in the dress and just started doing things that I didn't originally set out to do. And so it turned what probably could have been an hour and a half, 2 hour chunk of game into like 4-ish hours.
And you know that's how you get to a really fun play sesh, right? Like that's always a great way to spend some time in a Zelda game.
Yeah. So it was good. It was probably the most expansive amount of time I've spent accidentally side questing in a top-down Zelda game. Because, like, as we've been doing this for the pod, I know that the major side quests I need to do, so I normally dedicate time to go do that. I did not have any intention of doing side questy stuff this time. It just kind of happened. And that's fairly normal for a 3D game for me because I find exploration more rewarding in a 3D space. But it was just very natural and felt really good, especially going back and forth between Lorule and Hyrule. And each new section I entered, Hilda would contact me and just be like, I am Hilda. Like, yes, I know who you are, Hilda. Thank you. And she's very proper.
Yeah.
Like, that's one thing I did notice about her character. She's like, she uses like the royal we, and she is like that kind of monarch.
I love her little noise that she makes whenever she calls you. She's like, hey.
Yeah. And like Zelda's a little more hype. Yeah. Zelda's like a soprano, and then Hilda's like an alto too. And she's like, hey. Oh, hey, Hilda.
Hey, Hilda. How you doing?
How you doing over there? How you doing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was good. I was surprised at what happened with Yuga. I was surprised that he wasn't Toady. He turns into Big Bad. Like, I was not expecting that. So that was a cool little twist.
Yeah. I
obviously already knew about Hilda. I'd forgotten a lot about like her character, so that was cool to rediscover that. And the broad brush strokes there. Good. Yes.
Yeah. So I want to talk. We get introduced to Lorule for the very first time here, and a lot of our conversation around this game so far has been comparison talk, right? Mm-hmm. Talking about the way that this game compares to A Link Between
A Link Between Past?
A Link Between Past.
Is it a Link's Between Awakening of the Past?
That's Zelda Triforce of the Gods 1.5. A Link Between Past. No, we've been comparing this game a lot to A Link to the Past. And so now we have the analog to that game's version of the Dark World. And Josh, I want to bump it over to you and just ask, how do you feel that Lorule stacks up to the Dark World from the earlier game?
I think that the design of it in general is a little on the nose for like, you have the Hinox and you have, I actually don't remember the little sacks of worm enemies. I don't remember their names. Like you have a lot of those same exact enemies, and that feels a little weird to me because the Dark World was specifically, the Sacred Realm, but corrupted by Ganon.
And we're talking from
now full of monsters.
We're talking from a fictional standpoint. Like the rationale for all of this sits a little weirdly with you, right?
Yeah, like the idea that it is their Dark World is fine, right? But it's like I feel like they could have made it a little more different. It feels almost like they actually, well, we kind of know they originally set out to just remake A Link to the Past, right?
Yes.
And this kind of feels like it was almost a little leftover, like it was the Dark World, and then just they were like, let's just delete the pyramid and put a castle there instead. Yeah. And there's more differences than that, right? But some of it feels a little off to me. But generally speaking, like Lorule is fun, being like it's themed as it does have a theme of like being opposites from Hyrule. So like you initially meet the blacksmith and his wife again in Lorule, and where the blacksmith's wife is really, really kind in Hyrule, she's a jerk in Lorule.
Yeah, she's kind of the worst.
And you see that a lot where folks are like the opposite.
There's definitely a bit of
who they are.
doing another Star Trek thing, but there's definitely a bit of a mirror universe vibe at play here.
Absolutely, yeah.
Where it's the nega reality. So I definitely agree with that. I will say that I agree with you, Josh. This is one element like where I really do enjoy Lorule a lot, and especially as we come to learn more about the kingdom, I like the fiction of it a lot, and the story and the rationale for how it became what it is. Won't talk about that here, obviously, but I like it as a location, and I think that it's a very successful juxtaposition on the brighter, cheerier Hyrule in the same way that this dynamic worked in A Link to the Past. I do agree that I think in some ways this can at times be just a little too similar to the Dark World, right? And that even carries forward into the arrangement of dungeons, right? Where basically this dungeon and several others that we go to in Lorule are basically thematically just a redux of Dark World dungeons, to the point where a lot of them are even in the same place.
Right. And they do swap a couple of them around, right? But a lot of them are the same, but they, like I said before I feel like they are dramatically simplified versions of what A Link to the Past had. Like I did actually ask to be on this episode because I really like the Dark Palace and what they made it. But when you compare it to the Palace of Darkness, just thematically and like just how not big it is compared to the Palace of Darkness, it just feels a little bit like this is going to sound mean. It's the cheap knockoff version of the Palace of Darkness to me. And a lot of the dungeons feel that way, where they're just like, just a little bit like it, but they made it look like it and stuck it in the same place and called it the same thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think all of my base observations about these locations and places and themes are the same as yours. I think the difference is that I consider most of these to be, at least as far as memory serves, more interesting and fun versions of, like, not to a T, you know. I think some of the dungeons in A Link to the Past Dark World are more fun and interesting than the ones here, but I hold all of the Lorule dungeons in very high esteem for the most part, I guess is what I would say.
No, and I would say they're still great dungeons, right? And I'm clearly very biased toward A Link to the Past. There's just no denying that. But like I said before, I think that those dungeons feel a little bit more like you are just exploring a dungeon, like you're just exploring a space. And these are very designed.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, you know, we'll talk about that a bit more when we get to the dungeon map. But I will say, just while we're talking about juxtapositions, in A Link to the Past, that first moment that you load into the Dark World was a very big moment, right? Because they very intentionally made that world feel different from Hyrule that you had come from. I think the first moment that you step into Lorule in this game actually accomplishes that even better than A Link to the Past. And I think it's just because your transition point is coming through Zelda's bedchamber, right? You go through that crack in the wall and then you come out in the opposite version of it in Lorule, where, you know, like Zelda's bedchamber is very sunny. It feels very pleasant. Everything is arranged very nicely, and there's like delicate china on the wall and all that. And then you come through the crack in the wall and you're in basically the same room, but everything is torn to pieces. There's lightning. It feels like a much more dejected place than Hyrule. And the transition of tone is so immediate and so overpowering. I just think it's a really effective moment. And I really enjoy that about this section of the game.
Yeah, I agree. And even taking it just 1 minute further, like you immediately get thrown into the story cutscene with Yuga and Hilda. And A Link to the Past didn't have anything like that, right? There's no cutscenes of any kind. There's hardly any dialogue with like major story dialogue, right?
Yeah.
So like they're able to do that more effectively. The effectiveness of A Link to the Past's moment really relies a lot on the surprise, especially the surprise of it being 1991 and you think you've beaten the game, right? It feels like for 1991, it feels like you've played a whole game already.
Yeah.
And it's over, and then suddenly, surprise, you're not even halfway done. And they did a really cool trick in A Link to the Past with the pyramid to make it where you can like see Death Mountain in the background while you're standing on top of it. It's like they did some cool stuff to make that just a cool moment. But yeah, A Link Between Worlds uses all of everything modern we have about it for storytelling,
which is
and one ups it for sure.
It's kind of the Pokemon Gold and Silver effect, right? Where like you think you're done with the game, and then it's like, oh hey, whole nother game, ready to go? Yeah, it's really fun. Interesting little segue into Pokemon Gold and Silver, which we may be discussing in a bonus capacity on this show at some point before too long. Little teaser there. We'll follow up more on that later. No, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's a very effective thing for very similar reasons. We were talking about launching right into that big story cutscene, and I want to spend a few minutes talking about the fiction and lore implications of what we see here, because there's some really, really cool stuff that goes on. I was very excited for you to see this cutscene, Matt, and to see exactly what Yuga's aim was in reviving Ganon.
Yeah.
Because to my memory, this is a unique thing in the Zelda series. We've never really seen an enemy merge with Ganon in this way before.
Yeah, and it almost seemed like Yuga overpowered Ganon in some way to like take the Triforce of Power from him and then use that to fuse them together. So that was odd.
My big question here is definitely to what extent is Ganon like a willing and enthusiastic participant in this?
Right. I don't know at this point in time. I don't know if you find out or not. Don't tell me. But it's very interesting. Yeah. One of my first questions that came out of this cutscene was, where did Hilda come from? Like, Zelda is a descendant of the royal family of Hyrule. Last time we were in the Dark World in A Link to the Past, there was no such thing as the Dark World royal family.
This is notably not the same. This is not the same plane of existence.
Oh.
This is not the Dark World.
Oh.
Yeah.
I thought it was the Dark World.
No, probably best to clear that up sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I guess that makes a little more sense then. All right.
No, this is a completely...
And that's why we had the discussion about it being like a little on the nose for being the Dark World, because it's not the Dark World.
See, I thought it was. Like, I thought that we were just going back to the Dark World through a different version of transdimensional teleportation.
Yeah, no.
But apparently not.
No, because the Dark World is gone. The Dark World is just the Sacred Realm, but Ganon has corrupted it. And so at the end of A Link to the Past, you get the whole Triforce and you wish for everything to be better again. And so the Sacred Realm just goes back to being the Sacred Realm. Lorule is more like Termina from Majora's Mask. It's an alternate reality.
See, yeah, I didn't catch that.
Well, and in fairness, the I guess the history of Lorule is explored later in this game.
Okay.
But you don't really hear a lot about it right now. And so your confusion is understandable. But basically the story here is that at one point Lorule was a prosperous kingdom very similar to Hyrule.
Yeah. I got that impression from Hilda when she was saying, like, specifically relating to the cultists outside of the Dark Palace. She was like, these used to be my soldiers and they abandoned their posts and went to worship this dark creature. And that's my fault for not protecting them the way that I should have as their monarch. Like, I was like, oh, so this was like a whole kingdom thing. Like, yeah, cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Okay. Well, all right. I guess some of my confusion is now moot.
Yeah. But can we just talk about how actually pretty legitimately cool Ganon looks?
Yeah, he's like almost albino Ganon, and his huge spear scepter thing is
like
cool.
He's got a mane.
Yeah,
like a big old,
yeah. He's got the mane from Ocarina of Time.
It's really cool.
It's
looking.
Awesome. Yeah, and he looks bigger than just normal Ganon. Yeah, I liked it. I'm here for it. Although the even cooler part of that cutscene was Hilda just straight up, I don't know, she used strand on him or something. Like, boom, encase you in some magic spider webs. Like, okay, Hilda, look at you. Like, right out of the gate, are you more powerful than Zelda?
Yeah. And it's so interesting because a whole thing in A Link to the Past was like, you're getting towards the end of the game and you're trying to basically make it so that Ganon can't assemble all the sages, right? That's the premise there, right, Josh?
I'm sorry. The premise is that he can't reassemble the sages in A Link to the Past?
Yeah.
Because he's already, and it's kind of the opposite, right? He's imprisoned the descendants of the sages in A Link to the Past, and he just wants you to not get them all back. Without them, you can't get into his castle to do anything.
Gotcha.
Right.
So I guess
here you guys doing what Aghanim is doing at the beginning of A Link to the Past.
Right. I guess what I'm trying to get at here is that this moment where Yuga is basically like, you see Yuga succeed in his evil plan, you know? It's a very interesting thing to be happening at the midpoint of a Zelda game. Like, I think this is kind of the sort of thing that I usually would assume would happen right before the final dungeon of most Zelda games, right? Where like the villain has basically achieved their goal and now it's time to go beat whatever awful final boss comes from that circumstance, you know. But here it's like he's already done it and now we have to clean up the mess.
So fast forwarding to the end of this section a little bit, this felt more like Ocarina of Time to me, where the bad guy has succeeded and now the rest of the game is about how do we fix what has been done. In Ocarina of Time, it is how do we prevent it from ever having happened, because time travel. In this one, it feels like how do we stop Ganon while Hilda keeps him contained. And the way we have to do that is go reassemble the sages that were just used to accomplish this plan.
And obviously we have a hyper intentional callback to Ocarina of Time at the end of this section
with the
game.
sage. Yeah, with the sage chamber.
Right. And,
yes.
And how did you enjoy that, Matt?
That was so cool. I wasn't going to talk about it too in depth, but yes, dope.
Well, you can talk about that here. It's not part of the dungeon.
Yeah. Super dope. It looks almost exactly the same.
Same soundtrack.
Yeah. All of it was just nostalgia points, like Coke in the nose. Just, yeah, I'll take all of that sage chamber. Let's go. I've never done cocaine, so I wouldn't know what that actually feels like, but
good disclaimer. Thank you, Matt. What about,
nor do we encourage it. Don't do it.
What about you, Josh? How do you feel
Josh, have you ever done cocaine?
Don't feel.
No, I have not.
Okay, there you go. Good. Glad we're all on a page with cocaine. I'm
going to back up for 1 minute. We were talking about comparisons to other games, right? Aghanim actually does the same thing and succeeds the way Yuga does, right? Except that Aghanim is actually Ganon, right? So he actually succeeds. You just don't see it all in game. And that's, again, that A Link to the Past just didn't have the same cutscene storytelling capability. So a lot, like you see, if you watch the opening prologue, you will see Aghanim vanish one of the maidens, and then you get to see him banish Zelda. And that's all you get to see. But then you actually do the exact same thing you're doing now, and you go to the Dark World and you find all of the sages again to reassemble them, which is the same thing you do in Ocarina of Time. But they didn't have the Chamber of Sages as a concept, right? Ocarina of Time is my favorite 3D Zelda game. I'm about to lay high praise on this game. I think the inclusion of the Chamber of Sages is the single best thing about this entire game. I absolutely love it. I wish more Zelda games included it. I think it should just be like something you expect, like just a core part of Zelda.
Yeah.
To have that Chamber of Sages. And so that was shocking to me when I first saw it, and I still just absolutely love it.
Well, I mean, for like this has got very similar feelings to like I'm remembering the first time in Twilight Princess that I stumbled into the Temple of Time, right? And with the same music, same basic layout, all that. And it's such a crazy cool feeling. It's so wonderful to be back in a place that you have such fond memories for. And for a similar reason, I completely agree with you, Josh. The Chamber of Sages here is really, really wonderful, and I love being back there. I will say one of the things that I really appreciate about this game, in contrast to A Link to the Past, is that the sages are characters that we have actually that the game has like introduced us to, and that we have some knowledge of. That really kind of, like, I wouldn't say that this is a game that has a ton of heavy emotional stakes behind it, because this is still a top-down Zelda game, right? But it does help, right? It does help give us motivation for wanting to like rescue these people, because we've gotten to know them.
Yeah, you see Gully, and you see the Zora Queen and Irene, and I remember very early in this section of game, actually, right after I got the Master Sword, it was going to the Lost Woods. I fast traveled there. So I called Irene with the bell, and her empty broom shows up, and I was like, what in the ish is going on? And seeing her in painting form was like, oh, that sucks.
Well, yeah, and you've got like Impa, Rosso, like you want to be able to save all these people. There's also Asfala, and he can stay where he is.
Don't really care about that one too much. Maybe want his sand rod a little bit, but honestly, the rest of it, you can just stay there. I'm fine with that.
You can keep Asfala. It's fine.
Just give me a sand rod. We'll put him back in his painting, and everything is fine the way it is.
Oh, man. No.
I don't feel sorry for him. He deserved it. He was a dick. Some people deserve to be paintings, okay?
Well, there you go. Sorry, Asfala. That's you. You lost. But no, I mean, like really, really fun story and lore implications here. I will say that just traversal in the Dark World is, especially playing on hero mode, very, very scary, right? Because even with I think I have 6 or 7 hearts at this point, and even with that amount of hearts and a better sword, so much of what is in here is just super, super lethal to Link, especially on hero mode. I think basically every enemy in the Dark World is a 2-hit KO at this point in the game. And that really ups the difficulty factor, which I definitely appreciate, because as we've mentioned many times before on this podcast, I'm always looking for ways for these games to be harder for me to play. And this is definitely like, it's pretty difficult. There's a large spike in difficulty when you get to the Dark World.
No, I totally agree. Even not on hero mode, it was, it's difficult. Those moblins, the ones that throw bombs at you, not moblins. Yeah, they're moblins.
Are they moblins?
I don't know what
Josh?
they are. No, they're Hinox. Hinoxes.
Oh, Hinox. Oh, I thought you were talking about the moblin-sized dudes with the pitchforks.
Nah, whatever. Those are whatever. It's the Hinox that throw bombs at you.
You say they're whatever. They'll one-hit KO you on hero mode.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, well. They don't do that on non-hero mode, but even on non-hero mode, the Hinox are terrifying, and they take like 10 hits with the Master Sword.
Yeah.
I upgraded my bow before I went into the Dark World, so I'm shooting those 3 arrows, which is pretty cool. And still, like, it's challenging.
Yeah.
It is. It's the trash mobs are not trash mobs. They're not trashy.
Josh, I know a lot of people have a lot of different focuses of interest in Zelda games, like whether it be exploration or combat or story or dungeons or whatever. So obviously I'm one of those people who really enjoys a combat difficulty spike in these games. Is that something that you kind of esteem pretty highly when you're playing a Zelda game, or is it just sort of like something you have to put up with?
I wouldn't say I esteem combat difficulty highly. I'm more of especially after Breath of the Wild, I'm very much an exploration person. And I have found myself since then going back and like actually spending more time doing extra stuff when I replay Zelda games now. But otherwise, I'm kind of a dungeon puzzle kind of person. I do think that a lot of Zelda games are probably easier than they ought to be. My controversial statement for this one is, and actually for Link's Awakening also, the remake in particular, 8-way direction and the much better spin attack make the games way easier.
Yeah, the spin attack is really powerful.
Way easier.
Yeah.
So like that's something that makes it easier. I would say it seems like you've limited how many hearts you find. You can find a lot more pieces of heart than you've apparently picked up. That also makes the game easier.
Sure. I'm trying to take a balanced approach. Like I'm leaving room for exploration and trying to pick up heart pieces each week, but I'm also not going out of my way to just like truck through tons of them.
Right. And that's probably good if you want it to remain even remotely challenging, because there's a lot of them to get. And part of the design of this game where you can just get all the items and go do stuff means that there's very few that you can't just go get.
Yeah.
You know, some of them require that you beat a Kuko mini game or a baseball mini game to get, but which might take you some time. But other than that, it's just
my general rule of thumb is that I'm not poking around in sections of Lorule specifically that are not related to the dungeon I'm playing that week at the moment. So it's kind of where I'm sticking with it.
Let's see. I poked around the town a bit since they dropped you in it to begin with, and had some fun looking around finding secret stuff there. I got a bit sidetracked like Matt did, and I was going to say I think this game probably does that better than probably any other 2D Zelda game. I think the Maiamais are as close to Koroks and Gold Skulltulas as top-down Zelda has ever gotten.
Well, and as we said last week or the week before, I think arguably much more useful than either of those things.
And that's kind of where I land on them as well, is like I actually desire to find more Maimais so that I can upgrade my items, because they're also very cute. Yes. The Koroks are cute too, but like
the Maimais don't on you.
That's true. Well, presumably. Yeah, it's just upgrading items is something that is just massively useful and something I always desire to do.
So what all have you upgraded at this point?
So I've purchased the bow, the bombs, the hook shot, and I think that's it. And the hammer. So I've purchased the bow, the hook shot, the bombs, and the hammer, and I've upgraded the bombs and the arrows.
Okay, cool.
And I now have enough Maimais that I'm going to go upgrade probably the hammer. I don't know. We'll see what the upgrade does to it.
How about you, Josh? What all have you bought and upgraded at this point?
I actually haven't upgraded anything. I've been picking up Maimais and then I just like picking them up to collect them. I bought the hook shot, so I could upgrade that, but I haven't bought anything else. So
yeah, I've also only upgraded the bow and the bombs, and those are also the only two things that I bought at this point. So
I am very glad that I bought as many items as I did, because I done died in this dungeon.
Oh yeah,
I did.
So did I.
Yeah, it was. It was rough.
Well, that's about as good a segue as I can think of. Before I take that path, my last point that I want to say is Dark World theme makes its glorious return here. Let's freaking go. I love the Dark World music so much. I don't even care that this isn't really the Dark World. I love that this is the Overworld theme for Lorule. This is one of the all-time great pieces of Zelda music.
10 out of 10 banger.
Yeah, it's just incredible. Okay.
I'm surprised it hasn't shown up in more games.
Well,
genuinely,
it's one of those things where I think they probably would like to, but it's got to be pretty tough to find like a legitimate reason to stick it anywhere, you know?
Yeah, they can put it anywhere they want in Tears of the Kingdom.
Who knows? Maybe they will.
Okay,
they could surprise us.
Just put it in Hateno Village, and it just plays the whole time you're there.
In Hateno Village? I don't know about Hateno.
Well, what if Hateno Village is like
jacked up?
Has been like annihilated or something. It's like,
oh no,
everyone's dead. The houses are gone. Dark World theme.
Well, that would be appropriate then. Yes. Okay, fair enough. But please no.
All right. Okay. Well, now I'm going to go ahead and capitalize on that segue. Let's get into the dungeon map, which is the section of this week's episode where we talk about the dungeon, from mechanics to music and more. Dungeon this week is the Dark Palace. And I'm just going to say up front that I've been very, very excited to talk about this one, because in my memory, and now having played it again, I'm prepared to say that my opinion is the same. I think this is an excellent freaking top-down Zelda dungeon and is in contention for my top 5 or 3 favorite top-down Zelda dungeons of all time. I really, really like this dungeon.
Wow. That is a big wow. Yeah. That is a take. Okay. Then I'm just going to leave it with you to walk us through why that is, because I don't know if I have the same opinion, but please.
So for me, it's all about effective use of a theme and having mechanics that are different than what we normally get in top-down Zelda dungeons. I feel like dungeons and top-down Zelda games, for the most part, like obviously a lot of them do new and interesting things depending on what game you're playing, what the mechanics are, yada, yada, yada. This one feels so drastically different from so many top-down Zelda dungeons just because of the way that it utilizes such a simple thing as depriving you of like visual information, you know?
Right.
I think that that's such an effective tool, and it really contributes to the theme of the dungeon. It makes it feel claustrophobic. It makes it feel very, very dangerous to me. That coupled with the soundtrack that plays in here, which is kind of like elegantly sinister. Love the music in this dungeon. But I just think there's something really fun here. There's a great balance of mechanic where, especially the first few times I played it, like now I remember how most of this stuff works, and so the surprise isn't necessarily there. But the first time or two that I played this dungeon, it really took me quite a while to get through. The reason for that is because I think your first instinct when you get into a lot of these rooms is to just light as many torches as you can, right?
Right.
Like when you walk into a dark room, the very first thing you want to do is illuminate it as much as possible. Except the whole hook of this dungeon is that by doing that, you're depriving yourself of clues that are only present when rooms are not illuminated, right?
Yeah.
Like you basically have to put out torches in order to see walkways, to see arrows on the wall, to see all kinds of things. And I just think that's such like a really effective thing. And it also, again, it lends itself to that sense of danger because you know that you need to be putting lights out in order to see what you need to be doing. But also that's making it a lot easier for enemies to sneak up on you, to take hits from enemies that you just can't see because it's dark and they're walking around. There's no visual cue that they might be there.
The ghosties.
Until they're like on you or until they shoot like a pillar of flame at you or something, you know?
Yes, the Helmosaurs.
I just think that's like really, really an effective thing. And then on top of that, I just love how much, you know, we're talking about how Lorule is sort of like this cool negative version of Hyrule. And this dungeon is basically just a complete inverse of the Eastern Palace. Like the layout is incredibly similar, but it's recontextualized completely just by virtue of the fact that, like, yeah, a lot of the puzzles are more difficult. You have to put more thought into them, and the enemies are harder. But just the use of darkness, I think, is so effective here. And yeah, I've always just really loved it for that reason.
All right. Yeah. I mean, I think that all those are super valuable points. And I totally agree. The use of the illuminated, it almost looks like bioluminescence that you see on some like algae in the ocean, which I love. That effect always looks good. I think that it was very interesting of them to do such significant signposting of like where you need to go or where your objective is. And I thought that was a cool use of the upgraded engine that this is running on, to get those arrows that move, you know, sideways on the walls or down or, you know, whatever. The use of the lighting mechanics and physics actually looks really good, and I think works very well on the 3DS that I don't think could have worked on any other DS game really that I've played it up to this point in the show. So yeah, I think aesthetically you're absolutely right. It is a very well done and on it's a focused dungeon. It knows what it is and it plays into that in every category and in every way. And I think it's very effective at that.
Yeah. Josh, I mean, what do you think? Am I out of my mind?
No, you're not. This is my favorite dungeon in this game. And it's for mostly you kind of covered it all. The one thing that I would add too is that I like the way this feels, and it's kind of accidental aside from the darkness portion, right? Is that technically speaking, this is the bomb dungeon,
right?
Right. You have to bring the bombs in to get in. A bunch of the puzzles do use bombs for timing a switch or for blowing open a window to let light into the darkness, right? But because bombs are such like a key Zelda item that you usually just use all the time anyway, this dungeon feels less like it's designed around an item to me. It feels more just like it feels more like in A Link to the Past dungeon to me. It's like they took in A Link to the Past dungeon and then, like Matt said, used the extra capabilities of the 3DS with lighting and made it better. I do wish that it was bigger. Like you mentioned, it's very similar to the Eastern Palace layout wise. Like I kind of wish it was more like the Palace of Darkness in A Link to the Past.
Yeah.
Because I love that dungeon also. But no, the way you use the lighting, like you said, that you have to turn the lights off, I love. I think that's just excellent. And I actually find it kind of fun and challenging to try and solve the puzzles with the lights on.
Oh, yeah.
Which is kind of crazy, but it's like there's the room where you have to black it all out to see the maze, right? You can do that without it if you want to. You can turn the lights on and you won't be able to see like it. I don't think you can illuminate the whole room, but you won't be able to see the walls for most of it. And it's kind of fun to challenge yourself and figure out how to do it that way. But I also like this one because like I replay the games a lot and it feels like I still always miss something. Like the darkness actually works as a way to make me forget the puzzles.
Right.
And so even this time I got to the end where you're supposed to light for the 4 little switches or whatever they are, eyeballs. And I had missed one because I had overlooked one of the puzzles because it was in the dark. And I really like that here. I would say also just more broadly, Zelda doesn't use darkness a whole lot like this, but every time it does, I really like it. The now like soon to be classic example is the Typhlo ruins in Breath of the Wild. That's like in my top 3 favorite places in the whole game. And likewise, like this is my favorite dungeon here. And so I would love for them to just take the lights away.
That's such an interesting point about memory recall on replays, because one of the things that I think, I think it's very interesting that I never enjoy replaying Zelda games less, because the memory component really does mean that dungeons are pretty much always inherently less challenging the more that you replay a game, because you just start to have really good recall of the layout. Like you see the way a room is laid out when you walk into it. And you're like, okay, I know this door leads here. This one leads here. This is the puzzle, et cetera, et cetera. And the sensory deprivation that happens here really is very effective at making it very difficult to retain those details. And so I completely agree with you that that's a really fun byproduct of the darkness mechanic here. And then also to your point about just missing a lot of stuff, the darkness is very effective at creating a lot of trickety trick areas where there's like chests and stuff that you could, and most of them don't have anything super important. They'll have monster horns or lots of rupees or something. But it's still like, if your goal is to get every chest in a dungeon, then there's a lot that are very effectively hidden here just because of the darkness mechanic.
Can say that most of the time that I spent in this dungeon was trying to track down 2 missing chests that I just could not find. One of them was the Master Ore chest, and the other one was actually the Big Key chest.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I had a hard time with that one. I'll get into more with that later.
Can we talk about the Master Ore chest for a minute?
Yeah, I have negative feelings about that.
How long did that take you?
I had to Google it. Like it was killing me that I thought it was the Big Key because it was at the top floor. It was after you've unlocked
top floor in the dead center.
Yeah. I was like, this has to be the Big Key. Like there's no way it isn't. So I was driving myself crazy, and the way that the screen size on the 3DS makes it impossible for you to see that by hitting the switch at the back of the room, it flips the wall on the north side of the room. Like you can't see it. Yeah. So you either have to do the delayed hit just for no reason and then walk back to the north side of the room and see that wall flip, or you have to Google it to see somebody else had done it. And
so there is another way, actually.
Oh, do tell.
the hint glasses.
Yes.
The hint glasses make little ghosts appear in the dungeons sometimes. And there is a ghost there who gives you a hint about timing your hit on the crystal switch. I told you before I played this before release, there was no Googling it. I did not get this my first time in the dungeon. I got to the end of the game and I was missing a master ore and just started going back to look for every chest I had missed. I'm not even exaggerating to say this took me like over 2 hours to figure out.
Oh man, that would drive me insane.
And yeah, I was ready to throw the 3DS against the wall and never play the game again at the time. But I will never forget this puzzle now. It's like, to me, it's like an iconic puzzle of this dungeon because obviously this is the first master ore you've picked up. So I don't know that you know what it's for at all yet.
I don't, but I can kind of guess.
It's optional, but it's important, right? It's an important collectible. And so it's like you really want it. And it's a really it's a good puzzle, but it's an infuriating puzzle.
This sounds like a really good time for Matt to drop our big word.
Obtuse. It's the O word. It's our O word.
Put it in the jar.
It's back.
So okay. Just to give you a second to give your piece about this puzzle, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I kind of did. I just didn't think that it was designed well enough to be able to be discovered naturally. Like, I don't like it I don't like it when you have to use the hint glasses to figure it out, right? I don't like it when you have to use an owl statue, like put the beak in the owl statue to do a throwback to Link's Awakening, or when you have to use one of the Sheikah speaking stones in Ocarina of Time. Like, I feel like if you have to result to the hint mechanic, I don't think it's a well-designed puzzle, personally. And it goes back to something Max said, which was Zelda puzzles and dungeons are designed to make the player feel smart by incrementally dipping your toes into these. And to be fair, the delayed switch hit has been executed very well multiple other times in this dungeon, but it was always in a way where you could see the first time you hit the switch, you could see what happened and then figure out how to get the timing right. In this case, you hit the switch and you see that it raises the platform on the south side, and there's no reason to think that it doesn't do only that. There's no reason to think otherwise.
Yeah.
And I think that is what makes it obtuse and unenjoyable.
Putting the hint glasses to one side, really the only cue that you get to know that there's something you're supposed to be doing and exactly where it is by consulting the map. That's really all you have to go by, right? Is when you see TIE Fighter. When you see this, no, you're good. When you see this little chamber on the map and it's very clear that the map does not denote that there's a door leading to it, that's really all that you have to go on. And so I agree with everything that you're saying. I think especially judging it by the metric that you just established that Max had posited earlier, it does not conform to that rule of a successful Zelda puzzle, a successful Zelda dungeon puzzle. What I will say is that there is, I think, a very big callback here to the way that puzzles were handled in the older Zelda games, the ones that you're talking about that you really like a lot, Josh. When puzzles were definitely a little bit more obtuse and a lot less handholdy. I think that this is a kind of this is an execution of difficulty that a lot of modern Zelda games are afraid to do. And I appreciate it a lot just for that reason alone, because I think that as Zelda has gotten, as it's gone more and more from the older style of game to the newer style, puzzles just have gotten easier and much more transparent. And this does not conform to that rule. I really like it for that reason. I also have to say that, so now, we talked in earlier dungeons about the fact that once you get to Lorule, you do have a big thing to find in each dungeon, which you didn't in the Hyrule dungeons. And it's still not something that you need to collect to beat the dungeon. And it isn't for any of them. It's always some kind of upgrade item that you don't need to complete the game. And I think that's also a very fun callback to a lot of older Zelda games, Zelda 1, Link to the Past, where, you can totally you can get through a dungeon and make it out without having collected the thing that's in it. That's totally a possible thing to do. And so it's a fun little functional throwback in my mind to that older style of game.
Yeah, I was gonna say I actually did remember there's one other clue on that puzzle, and it's that we haven't talked about the boss yet, but there is a mask on the wall when you're in the dark. The problem is still that they only use that flipping wall mechanic in one other room. Those panels have the same pattern on them.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you put that together, you can figure it out. But I think that the criticism of you can't see it is also kind of they use that in other areas because the game is 3D and a lot of it is designed to be you can't always see everything from one perspective, right? Because the walls raise out of the center of the rooms. There's a simple puzzle where you have to bomb the floor and then fall down to get a key that I didn't see the first time I went past it because the walls obstructed my view. It wasn't until I had gone downstairs and then come back upstairs and the camera was different that I saw the puzzle. And I feel like this is kind of similar, that I agree there's no way to see this, right? But it's kind of a side effect of the taking the top-down Zelda games and actually making them 3D.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. We have a few other interesting instances of perspective and cause and effect within the dungeon, just aside from this, right? Of course, the main mechanic of how you get into the boss room is by illuminating the 4 eyes that are in the main chamber before the boss room. And it's definitely an interesting thing where I don't know if it's communicated super effectively before you get to that room that pillars of light make it from one floor to the next. Was that obvious to you right off the bat, Matt?
It was, just because when you open up any one of the boarded ones, it goes down in the darkness and has the little flash effect where it goes bing. And I was like, oh, that does something that I need to be doing more of.
But there was also there was a beam of light that you had to make way for earlier in the dungeon. And I'm not sure if you even realized that's what you were doing at the time.
No, I didn't realize that it was opening up the boss chamber, but I did see the little ding flash and was like, okay, I should probably do more of that. So anytime that I found a spot where I thought that I could get that light filtering down, that's what I was aiming for.
Gotcha.
So I think that was well enough telegraphed to know that it was important, but right up front, you didn't know why it was important.
Yeah. So, Josh, you've said that you think one thing that this dungeon really needs to kind of bring it up to being, far and away better than the Dark Palace of A Link to the Past is size. You think it's a little small. In what way would you have expanded this dungeon to make it a little bit better?
I mean, it's almost a criticism of most of the dungeons, right? They feel a little compact to me compared to A Link to the Past. And so it's all of the floors, right, are just a central room with a few little rooms on the sides. It is essentially the layout of the whole dungeon, right? And I like it more when dungeons are a little more sprawling than that, where it doesn't feel like every floor is the same exact layout. And the Palace of Darkness does that. That's the A Link to the Past version, right? It has... You have to bomb open a wall, and then you take a teleporter, and the teleporter sends you somewhere else in the dungeon. And it does have some of the verticality, which the Dark Palace repeats, where you have to jump from one floor down to another to get keys. But there's just a lot. There's just a lot more. It's not as focused, right? And so there's kind of a pro and con there. But this dungeon is very focused, but also very compact. it is essentially hubs with circles of rooms around them.
Yeah. I think that so from a critique standpoint, if I had to really maybe hypothesize one way that this could have been just a little bit more fun and engaging is maybe if we had just had one more floor. It's a 3-floor dungeon. Maybe if we had a 4th floor, and because my thing is that once you get to that main room with the boarded up windows, all of the windows you need to open to access the boss room are for the most part in there. And I think if we had a 4th floor with yet another room on top of all of that, where maybe one extra window was, and there was another puzzle that required you to, or that you had to kind of clear in order to open that window, I think that might have been just the little extra bit of space that this dungeon needed to feel, like a really, really excellent size. Because I do agree with you, especially when you look at it just on the map, it is a very small looking dungeon. And I'll always take more space whenever they feel like they can give it to us. I think that might have been a good way to accomplish it, but that's a coulda, shoulda, woulda sort of observation.
Right. It's an excellent dungeon. Right. And it follows the same general design philosophy of the whole game. So it's on par there design wise. Just I personally kind of prefer the older way of doing dungeons.
Yeah. Matt, you said you died in here. What got you?
The boss.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. Okay. Me too. Yeah, me too. Well, I mean, I don't want to move on to the boss just yet unless everyone feels like they've said everything that they sort of want to about this one. Josh, did you have anything extra?
I think we've probably covered it. I really wanted to talk about the Master Ore Chest. And yeah, there are more meaningful, cool upgrades in some of the other dungeons. That's kind of a tease for Matt, but you're not always just going to walk out with I wonder what this is. Some of the stuff you walk out with is more explicit of what you're getting. But not hidden behind a puzzle that requires the internet to figure out.
Right.
But no, I think we've covered it. It's great.
Cool. Well, let's go ahead and talk about the boss then, which is once again a callback to the boss that exists in the Dark Palace in A Link to the Past. In that dungeon, the boss was the Helmasaur King. The boss in this dungeon is the Gemasaur King, which is basically a very similar critter, just covered with a lot of precious stones.
And gives you lots of rupees, which was really nice.
Yeah. And I actually found this to be so, last week we were talking about how the boss fight in the House of Gales was fun, but I think that the boss needed a little bit of extra lethality, right? A little bit more damage dealing potential. And man, did I ever get it here.
Yeah, I was about to say, your wish was granted. This guy will F you up heartily.
2-hit KO with the amount of hearts that I had.
That doesn't surprise me.
And yeah, it was, I love so much about this boss fight. I love that one, it executes very well on, both the item that you have to use to clear this dungeon, which is the bombs, and then also the main mechanic of the dungeon, which is darkness and light. Those two things together, I think made for a really, really, really excellent boss fight. It doesn't go by quick. You really have to pay attention to your positioning relative to the boss. Especially once he goes into aggro mode, he's fast.
Oh yeah, he really goes. I really liked how even in his damage dealing quote unquote stationary phase, he moves a lot. So you have to be very intentional about where you place bombs.
And it's not a big room.
No. And you have to be very intentional because the bomb doesn't do enough AoE, even with the big bomb, to hit the opposite side of its body. So if you bomb the back right flank, but you were aiming for the back left flank and he turns, you don't get that damage. You don't blow him up. So I thought that was really good. Also, it was kind of tricky to get him into position to hit the helmet. I thought was the hardest part to hit, mostly because I kind of forgot about my shield. I don't know why, but I did. Like, I didn't think about just like laying the bomb, standing still, raising my shields for him to shoot me. I was trying to dodge stuff. And so I did a lot of like bombing him and doing nothing the first time around, which is how I ended up dying. Was I wasn't getting the helmet off fast enough. The helmet stayed on, and it really drug out that first phase where I wasn't even doing any damage to him. Then I got low enough that we got into the second damage phase, and he starts flying around the room, and then eventually he, extinguishes the torches. You can't hurt him at all in that state.
Yeah.
And he's moving just crazy fast, faster than Moldorm was, I think. And squishing you into walls crazy fast.
Yeah. Yeah. What I really had to do in here was so I died the first time, and once you get into the aggro phase, I was just having to be so careful about making sure that I was close to the first torch whenever that started, so I could light the torch and then just merge into the wall and more safely get around to the next one.
Yep.
Because what I was doing was getting him to his aggro phase, and then like, oh crap, I got to walk over to this torch and light it. Now I've got to go over to this
across
other torch
the room
and
diagonally,
and like he's just so stinking fast that like if you're doing it that way, you're taking hits, and it only takes 2 to put you down. So definitely a very challenging, very fun fight. Do you enjoy this one, Josh?
Yeah, it's great. I didn't think about merging into the wall. That's a good idea.
Yeah, that saved him. That saved my butt a lot the second time I fought him.
Yeah, like I did not die, but I went in knowing very much what to expect and have more hearts and berries, and I'm not playing hero mode. But yeah, like I think it's great. It's better than Helmasaur King as a boss fight. I'm not. It might be on par difficulty wise, maybe. I think Helmasaur King is reasonably challenging. It's not Mothula, but
it's not Mothula. It's certainly not Mothula.
It really isn't.
But no, I think this one's great. You can just throw the bombs at it. I don't know if y'all.
Yeah, they do. They do explosion on contact with the helmet.
Yeah. So that makes it I feel like that makes it a little bit easier than the A Link to the Past version, where you either had to time the bomb very carefully or just use the hammer. But yeah, that second phase running across the room is rough.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I actually, this is the nice thing about this game. I remember a lot about how the dungeons work and how to solve them, but I don't have a great memory of the mechanics for any of the bosses, especially in Lorule. And so, I went into this one having to rediscover it in a lot of ways. And that adds challenge, and I really appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to that being the case with the other Lorule dungeon bosses as well. Because I just have a vague.
I'm gonna hype it up, but there are some cool bosses in Lorule.
And I have a vague memory of them all being reasonably difficult. So we'll see if that
sure. Like they're not pushovers necessarily, and they're not all Link to the Past boss remixed either, right?
No.
So there's some cool new stuff in there.
Yeah. So that's going to be a really fun thing to keep track of as we kind of go forward into the game. But does anyone have anything else they want to say about the dungeon? Excuse me, about the dungeon before we move on to the next part?
Gully is great.
I like his little personality. He's such a cheery little guy. He's a seven sage.
That was fun.
Not sure if he said that right.
I really hope that he's not just going to be stuck in the sage temple forever, and his parents are just going to be like, so I guess my child is like a godlike figure now that I never get to see again. That would be kind of sad for everybody.
A notable difference in these sages versus Ocarina of Time is that these guys are not dead.
Yeah, that is true. Yes, he isn't dead. So there's hope.
There is hope for Gully, but yeah, really fun to see him in the Chamber of Sages at the end of this whole thing. And I think in some ways it's fun because I usually do this dungeon first anytime I play this game. I know we put it first in the order just kind of arbitrarily, but I usually do it first. And it's always fun freeing Gully first because he's kind of the character that you got to know the most in the early half of the game. You know, so it feels like a big win right off the bat in Lorule that you kind of like have already saved the person who you're probably closest to.
Which is why I'm glad you chose this one as our first Dark World dungeon, because ZeldaDungeon.net has this as their like seventh. It's seventh overall, but they have Thieves Hideout and Desert Palace before this one, and I'm like, I'm sure Desert Palace is where you unfortunately save Asfala, and I would hate to save Asfala before saving Gully. That would suck.
It's actually not.
Oh, so, well, anyway. It's beside the point.
So, yeah, the 2 points, I guess. One, doing Gully first is cool. Also, it's kind of a throwback to Saria.
Yes.
Right? Is like the friend you had, the closest friend of the people, right? Because you get the feeling, not even just the feeling, it's just kind of explicit. Link and Gully already know each other at the beginning of this game, right? Gully's got a key to your house, apparently.
Right.
Apparently, everyone has a key to Link's house.
Who doesn't have a key to Link's house?
Or maybe he just leaves it unlocked. I don't know.
But so you already know him, so you're clearly closer with him. All the other characters, I think you meet for the first time at the beginning. Yeah. So it's sort of you save your friend first. It's a cool throwback. I would say Zelda Dungeon, putting them in that order, and really, I think you will find that most guides, like I can't tell you right off how ZU has them labeled, will order them in a way that the writer thinks is like really beneficial because of what you get out of them. Because they know what the special item is, right? And getting certain special items earlier, or getting the sand rod from Asfala earlier, right? Might make the game easier. And they're probably trying to do
I will actually say that
trying to get you the cool upgrades.
And I will say to that point, when I did arrange the dungeon schedule, I was kind of keeping in the back of my mind which dungeons had things that, I don't know, like increase your defense, for instance, or do other, like add other interesting bonuses to your gameplay experience, and was trying not to front load those. Like I didn't want to get to a situation where our back dungeons were all like Master Ore, you know?
Right.
So
I'm sure the guides are doing the opposite, right? Because their goal when you're writing the walkthrough is you want to make it as easy as possible for folks.
Yeah.
So, and this game lets you do that. You'll see the same thing with Breath of the Wild guides. Everyone has an opinion on what the best right order to do the Divine Beast is.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, cool stuff. Let's go ahead and move on to part 4, which is Bloopy Trails, where we talk about interesting things that diverted our attention this week. Josh, I'm going to let you go first on this one.
I went gambling. There's a
very wholesome pastime.
There's a treasure chest game in I actually don't know the name of the town in Lorule that they drop you in, and it's the same traditional treasure chest game that's been in lots of games before, where you just, except he charges you a lot more for it. I think he charges 200 rupees to play. You can get all of it back and more if you're lucky, but there was a piece of heart in there, so it only took me 3 tries to get the piece of heart. So, and I think I made back all the money I spent. Just kind of broke even and got a piece of heart out of it.
Breaking even is the best that I can ever seem to do when I do any form of gambling. So,
there is also there's another mini game where it's like a shovel mini game. Cody would love it. It's actually not. Actually, there's no shovel. Now that I think about it, it's just picking up rupees. But it's the replacement for the shovel game from Link to the Past, and I played that one also. I'm not as good at that one. It's an interesting mini game where they just put you into a field full of money and say pick up as much money as you can within the time limit, which is 30 seconds, but there's no timer. And if you don't come back and talk to the game manager before the timer is up, then you don't get anything. And if you get there really close to the timer being up, you get a bonus. They'll like double how much money you picked up. So I played that a bit, hunted a whole bunch of Maiamais. But otherwise, it was kind of a straight shot a little bit, other than just looking around town for whatever extra stuff. I've got 4 bottles, I think.
I meant to go get number 3, and I just completely, like after I bought the bombs, it just completely slipped my mind to go back and do it. But that's probably thing number 1 I'm going to do when I log back on next week.
Yeah, so there's one of them that I kind of only half have, right? There's a quest you have to do with it. But then I've picked up another one that I can use all the time. I can't even remember where you get it. The 4th one I got, I was just looking it up actually.
It's not Link's house, obviously, but it's in
it's in the empty house. Yeah.
You have to drop a bomb on the back wall and go in that way. So.
Yep, I got that one.
So I did that, and I also picked up. There's one that has like a letter inside that you just pick up the bottle, and it's letter from Ruto style. Has a request, and you've got to fulfill the request in order to get the bottle afterward. So I haven't done the quest yet, but I have the bottle.
Yeah.
I think that's probably all the extra stuff I've done. There's some other mini games. Oh, I got the giant bomb. I played with it and opened a fountain where you throw money.
And I have not gone and done that yet.
I was about to say, I didn't know that was a thing. Yeah. Cool.
You'll find it, Matt. How about you? What did you get done this week?
Oh, like I said at the beginning, I did a lot of my hunting, bought a lot of items, which was good since I died. Didn't lose everything. I got the piece of heart from the stylish lady in Kakariko Village by getting into her house through the crack in the wall, which was kind of creepy, but, whatever. I also got the piece of the bottle in the abandoned house. I got the bottle under the bridge in Hyrule, so I now have 3 bottles.
Nice.
I didn't do any mini games.
This game has a lot of mini games. I think I feel like for a Zelda game, and I actually think most of them are pretty great. There's one real world sport related mini game that is kind of love it or hate it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I found it, but didn't play it. It's the baseball one. And I got up there and I was like, I don't really want to do this.
You're
right
like,
now.
I don't know if I'm feeling baseball right now.
Yeah, just not really. So, I think that's most of the big stuff that I did. I wandered into the Dark World version of Lake Hylia and saw the huge lava palace that we're going to have to go to at some point. And I unstuck the turtle from the wall, and I'm sure that that's going to play a part later, but I didn't follow up on that. So that's something I'll follow up on later. Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, I did a lot less than y'all this week. I did collect a few more Maiamais and heart pieces, and I played the Cocoa Run minigame, which is a lot of fun. And I'll go back and hit the more difficult versions of that pretty soon here. But I was mostly all business this week, so I'll leave myself some time next week to really get up to some more shenanigans. But let's get on to part 5, which is Z targeting, where we lock on to fascinating characters or enemies that we happen to cross. Matt, I'm going to let you go first.
Oh, thank you. I don't know if I want to blow the Hilda load too early. You know what? I'm going to do it. It feels like a good Hilda part because she is intriguing. She seems like a much more complex, complicated, somber version of Zelda, which I think is obviously what they were going for, and I think that is communicated very well from her demeanor and her entrance and the things that she says to you as you wander around various sections of Lorule. I think that she is obviously very powerful. I'm starting to believe that Her Majesty, the Her Majesty that Yuga was always talking about, like saying Her Majesty will appreciate this painting, is her. So I'm kind of waiting for a villain double cross of some kind. I don't know if that's going to pan out or not, but I think she's an interesting and compelling character that I'm very excited to learn more about and see where her character journey goes.
She has a scepter, and I really wish that Zelda had a scepter.
Zelda needs a scepter. Yes. Yeah. You're absolutely right about that.
Definitely a good choice in Hilda. Of course, you can now not use her for the rest of the season, but I don't think you made a bad decision in dropping it now. So for mine, I'm actually going to go with. So we haven't really done enemies too much in this game so far, but I'm going to go with the Gemasaur King, and I have a reason even past just the fact that.
It was super cool.
That it's like super cool and a really fun boss, and it makes you rich. I really like the lore that Hilda sort of establishes with the Dark Palace, which is that, like you were saying earlier, Matt, her entire army deserted her to basically become the cult of the Gemasaur King, right?
Which is pretty cool.
Which is cool. And I thought it was really interesting because I think this is a little bit of headcanon, but obviously Lorule does not seem like a particularly affluent place, right? It doesn't seem very prosperous. It seems like it's very... scraping by for the people who live there. And I think it's a really cool lore bit that so Hilda could not offer anything substantial to her army. And so they completely desert her for this monster that is basically just made of riches,
Yeah. It reminds me a lot of, dragon cult worship, which is a big thing in specifically one of my favorite series, Dragon Age. It kind of reminded me of that, and I like that. That's a pretty cool, it's a pretty cool thing for villains to do, is worship uber powerful monsters that are kind of unknowable and also potentially rich.
I thought it was very fun that all the little guards in the maze that leads up to the Dark Palace, which we didn't actually even talk about. We do have
we didn't talk about that at all, did we?
We have a classic stealth section in this game, which is very reminiscent of your Hyrule Castle Guard sort of situation, and is actually a lot more fun with the addition of wall merging, right? That makes it a lot less annoying to deal with, and so I enjoyed it for that reason. But all of the guards that are guarding the palace, I don't know if you noticed, but they're all wearing little Gemasaur King shaped masks.
I did notice that. I didn't connect those dots until I got into the dungeon and realized that it was the Helmasaur. I thought it was the Helmasaur King, but yeah. TIE Fighter.
But yeah, so that's going to be mine for the week, is the Gemasaur King. Josh, how about you?
All right, I'm going to actually take it to kind of a weird one, maybe. But good.
Take us on a ride, Josh.
Because this is a notable character or characters that I don't like very much that we actually didn't talk about. We kind of skipped over it. There are 9 Poes who live in Lost Woods.
Oh, right. We also didn't talk about the Lost Woods puzzle.
Yeah.
I hate it.
It is awful. It sucks. It was terrible. I never want to do it again, ever.
I dread doing it every time. I feel like as I've gotten older and played the game more times, I just get worse and worse and worse at it. It does have a failsafe in place where if you fail over and over, it starts removing the number of Poes. I don't know how low it actually goes before it stops making it easier for you. But my choice is the 9 Poes who guard the Master Sword. It is very interesting that they have decided to do this. I really like Poes in general in the Zelda series. I would love to see them more often, but these Poes, not friends.
One of these days, I'm going to actually remember the solution to the final Poe area,
where it's just
the third
go
one.
backwards.
It's not.
Yeah.
I feel like that one's always the same, but the other ones are not.
No, they're not. I had to do this 5 times.
And that's what's. Yeah. And so you can't just memorize it. And that's what makes it annoying, right? Pretty much every other Lost Woods that I can think of, there's a solution. Even Breath of the Wild, right? Where it just seems like it's a big forest. There is a set path. And if you just learn where the trees are, you can just run through it. This one, there is no way to do that.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating.
It's definitely very tricky. Like trying to follow. It's really similar to the barrel item minigame in Mario Party, where you have to follow the barrels around to grab whichever item you wanted. It's frustrating for a similar reason, like because it's capitalizing on having a lot of things that look the exact same that are kind of like switching places. And so, yeah, that does make it a tough puzzle. But I just think it's such a cruelly genius way to do that final room because I failed 3 times there and was just like, what is the deal? Like, it's telling me not to follow the pose, and like those pose that it highlighted, all 3 of them, they're each going into one of the tunnels. And it's like, I must have seen it wrong. So I would just pick one at random and get shooped back to the beginning. And then on the 4th time, I was finally like, oh,
yep.
All right.
That's exactly what happened to me.
I got it. Yep. I'm there now.
I will say this is a warning for future season, and I won't even tell you which season it'll be. This is not the only time the Zelda series does this, and I don't think either of you have played the games or finished the games where this happens otherwise.
Can't wait. We'll put
but this needing to walk back the way you came does happen.
We'll put a pin in that one and see if we can catch it whenever we finally get to it. Save this one for future memory. All right. Well, that does bring us to the end of part 5. Let's get into part 6, which is where we let Matt wrap up this section of the game in as succinct a way as he can think to do.
This section of the game puts us into high gear with the transversal into Lorule after a really fun exploration and combat gauntlet through Hyrule Castle, which we also didn't talk about somehow. And that brings us into this game's version of the Dark World, where we get to meet some very interesting characters. We get to see Yuga perform his dark ritual and merge with Ganon, and then we get to see Zelda's counterpart in Hilda and her powerful abilities to contain the dark beast Ganon. We also get to go on a lot of journeying around Hyrule and Lorule, exploring and beefing up our wallet and buying items from Ravio and upgrading those items till we come to the Dark Palace, which is a very dark and twisted version of the eastern part of the map of Hyrule, infested with cultists. We follow through a decently fun stealth puzzle into what is probably according to Lyndon and Josh, the best dungeon of this game, which has some really great mechanics, great use of the 3DS engine, and huge improvements over the Dark Palace of A Link to the Past, culminating all the way into a really satisfying and very difficult boss fight with the Gemosaur King. Looking forward to a lot more exploration to come, more excellent dungeons, and seeing where this story takes us.
Excellently done, as always, Matt. You were very correct. We completely forgot to talk about Hyrule Castle. I don't think there's actually too much to really get into there. It's an enemy gauntlet, really, and it
was fun. I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
It was good.
Yeah, it is fun. I will say, we do need to go back to the music real quick and just say that earlier in the season, you were kind of lamenting the absence of the Link to the Past version of the Hyrule Castle theme.
Yep.
And here it is for you, Matt.
It was great. It was really wonderful. Fully orchestrated in all of its glory.
Talking about those all-time great Zelda tracks, and this is one of them.
Yep. It was really fun.
Yeah, I actually really liked the Yuga fight in the castle.
Yes,
also.
It was very good. It was very fun.
Definitely a big step up in difficulty from the first time you fight him in the Eastern Palace. I think it's a really funny thing that Yuga does, where whenever you really start kicking his ass, he's just like, I don't have time for this. You're beneath me.
And you're like, dude, I just whooped you and you didn't touch me a single time. What do you mean you don't have time for this?
Like, okay.
No, I do like also that it's another throwback to Link to the Past, where Aghanim has 3 copies or 2 copies in himself, right?
Yeah.
And they do the same thing again, but it is a more challenging fight than that.
Hyrule Castle looks way bigger on the inside than it does from the outside. Like,
yeah, it's got that Harry Potter effect of like, just where did all of this come from? I don't understand.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of the Sacred Realms Rundown. We'll be back next week with another installment of the Sacred Realms Rundown, talking about another section of Lorule that we get to explore. Josh, it has been a great time having you on the show, man. This was this was one that I was really, really looking forward to, and I did not know that you esteemed the Dark Palace so highly. I'm glad to find out that was true, because that made it even more fun to talk about than I was really expecting it to be.
Yeah, no, it's great. Everybody should just keep a save file at the Dark Palace. You can play it over and over.
There you go.
I don't even do that, but everybody else should.
You got to practice what you preach, Josh. Oh, man. Cool. Well, obviously, we'll be having you back on the show at another point in the future. Man, I don't know if I think the rest of this season is pretty much spoken for, which means that we may be talking to you again when we're just neck deep in Tears of the Kingdomsville.
That's not that far away.
It's not that far away. And I think that we've kind of said on the podcast before what our plans are going to be around the launch of that game. And I definitely think that we're going to want to have you on at least for one of our early, not main season, but just impressions episodes around that game whenever it does come out. So definitely looking forward to that. There's going to be some great conversation, and who can't be excited about that? It's almost here. It's freaking great.
We are just antsy in our pantsy for it.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Matt.
Yeah, I'm basically only playing Zelda games at this point. I finished Metroid Prime, so I can just focus on Zelda. So I'm just replaying until Tears of the Kingdom.
I'm gonna play more Metroid Prime tonight. I'm actually really excited about that. I really after my first 2 or 3 hours in that game, I was kind of like, okay, yeah, this is pretty good. And now it's just really hitting hard. I'm like, hell yeah, Metroid Prime is freaking sweet. I'm enjoying the hell out of it. So
excellent.
Definitely recommend it.
Even before they remade it.
Recommend it very highly. All right. Well, are you ready to get out of here for the week, Matt?
Let's do it. It has been a Monday, so I'm ready to go.
Gotta get this guy to bed. All right, y'all. Well, if you enjoyed today's show and you'd like a little extra Sacred Realms in your life, you can head over to patreon.com/sacredrealmspod and become a patron. If you've got no rupees, it is not a problem. 5-star Apple Podcast reviews are a great free way to support us. More reviews means that more people see our show. That makes us very happy Hylians. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram @SacredRealmsPod for updates on the podcast and for behind-the-scenes action. Sacred Realms will be back next Wednesday with our thoughts on A Link Between Worlds Chapter 5. We'd love for you to play along with us and to share your thoughts on our social channels. A Link Between Worlds can be played on the Nintendo 2DS and 3DS family of systems. In the meantime, may your hearts be full, may your arrows never miss. We'll catch y'all next time. Sacred Realms is an independent podcast production which is produced, edited, and mixed by me, Lyndon Willoughby. Our music comes from Zelda and Chill by Mikkel and is graciously provided to us by Mikkel and Game Chops Records. Zelda and Chill is available to stream on Spotify or to purchase directly from GameChops.com. Finally, our thanks go to Nintendo for creating such exceptional and innovative experiences.